Hey, family, this is the Eastern Star Church where Jesus is exalted and the word is explained. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. And as always, this is the Debrief where we dive deep into Sunday's message. And this week, I'm Pastor Jay, and I have two of my colleagues with me and friends. Percy Bland, Pastor P, pastor at Eastern Star Church, and then Jan Shirley Ann Downs.
Sure.
Who is our director over membership at Eastern Star Church. And so I'm excited about my friends here, and I'm excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. And for those who are tuning in, make sure that you share this video, you tag somebody who needs Jesus in this video, and you dive into the comments. Let's debrief together as a family, a virtual digital family this evening. And so with that, let's hop right into it. And this question is for both of you all, and for all of you who are tuning in. What was your major takeaway? Let's start with Pastor P. From Sunday's message, Pastor talked about when you get that sinking feeling.
Man.
Matthew chapter 14, verse 29 and 32, the story of which Peter walks on water with Jesus until he takes his eye off Jesus and begins to sink in the situation. And so when you get that sinking feeling, Pastor P, what was your major takeaway from that message?
Exactly what you just said. That was my main takeaway. No, man. I think in a nutshell, it would probably be the fact that when Pastor kind of speculated a little bit about the thoughts of the people in the boat, the rest of the disciples, and how they might have been perceiving, his really request to go out into another level of risk in the middle of that storm. Seeing just about how many people, 12, I don't know, about 8% of the people on the boat, 8% of the disciples had the nerve to ask Christ for an instruction in a situation like that. And even though they was doing what he said, doubt and fear was still present. But, Pastor talked about the darkness and he talked about the storm. But just to have that nerve to ask Christ for yet another level of risk of drowning so that he can get closer to him. That really, really blessed me, man.
Yeah, for sure. Janai, what was your major takeaway from Sunday's message?
Major takeaway. First of all, I love the book of Matthew. I love all the stories about Jesus and how this thing went down. And I usually try to put myself in those situations. Like if I was Peter, would I be that confident in Jesus to be like, yeah, bid me to come and walk on the water and do exactly what you're doing? That right there takes a lot of confidence. And then obviously he started sinking. So my major takeaway was God will pick you up when you're sinking. Like we don't have to really worry. That whole thing that Pastor was talking about, how there's fear not for every day of the year. Like we don't have to fear. Even though our world can be going absolutely crazy around us, no matter what, we don't have to fear. God is going to pick us up.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, that sermon, of course, anytime Pastor Johnson preached, was powerful and very helpful, even to me as well. And one of the things that stood out to me in that sermon was his buildup of the context. All right. John the Baptist being killed and Jesus spending a long time with God. And, the disciples dealing with that storm and all of those things. And, for me, what stood out was, even Jesus had to get away from what's going on, during that time. His cousin, John the Baptist, who's a young man, as Pastor described, who is now being killed in this unjust system as a result of him speaking truth to power, and his activism work now has put him in a dangerous position, and now he's being killed by the Roman power. And so with that kind of that injustice that was going on in the midst of Jesus's context, he has a friend that is, or his cousin, a family member, who is now being a victim of the system. And so with all the pressure that goes on with being Jesus, he's a leader in the community, all these things, he decides to kind of step away and kind of deal with himself in that moment. And I thought that was very powerful. Like, it just shows the humanity of Jesus, right? Like we see Jesus doing all these great things as God, but sometimes we forget that he's word made flesh, that he was king, and that he knows how we feel. And he shows us how to, deal with that type of situation. When you're dealing with social injustice, it's okay to go out and take a break allow your mind to kind of decompress, and in that moment having conversations with God. But in addition to that, he dealt with Jesus feeding the 5,000, and the crowd wanted to make him king. Then he tells his disciples to go over to the other side. They're in this storm. Janai, anything within the context that he kind of built out, did anything kind of stand out to you, or what were your thoughts on how he kind of built that framework before we got to Peter walking on water?
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. It made me think about even thinking about John the Baptist and how old these gentlemen were. Like they were you guys' age, right? And I think about the civil rights movement. A lot of folks at the time were like in their 30s and 40s. Like so Martin Luther King, when he was killed, he was 30 something years old. And we see pictures sometimes we're thinking folks are, way growner than what they are. And a lot of times some young people don't feel like they fit in. So him giving that context about John the Baptist being probably 33, 34 years old, just a few months older than Jesus, like that is really amazing to me. And it showed just how much we can do, no matter what age you are, no matter what you bring to the table. I mean, that context just set it up that, just do what it is that God is calling you to do, no matter what.
Yeah, it's so dope how many parallels there are to like right now. And my youngest brother, like I'm about to turn 35 Thursday, and my youngest brother just turned 30. So all four of us are over age 30 now. So, and of course, like you said, Janai, like Jay, Bowie, like all of our people, we all are around that same age. And to see us really doing ministry, I mean, that's what the disciples were, right? They were an extension of Christ's ministry on earth as he was training and discipling them. And they had just got done doing ministry. We can look at right now with the 5,000, he was feeding the 5,000, and talk about some of the work we're doing with Care Center, right? And some of the other things we're doing in the community. And right after he got done ministering, that's when he went to go be alone. But it's hilarious to me how in the midst of that chaos with dealing with the stress of dealing with people and ministry. Remember, he had just got our book, like, only reason why y'all follow me anyway is to get some food. Y'all trying to get some bread, but it's all good. Bring them over here, sit them down. We still gonna feed them, right?
Right.
And then to be in the midst of that oppressive power in the Roman government. But I just thought it was crazy how Jesus went to go pray, be by himself, and then it's like storming. I imagine it's lightning, it's dark, and Jesus is just like walking around there, like strolling around on the sea. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, that's my type of leader, right? That's my type of guy. One that can just find peace in that storm and be out there praying, like walking in the midst of the storm with no panic. So the context is what kind of created that trouble. And we know that in darkness, that's where the light shines the brightest, and people's attention are drawn to the light. So I see that in this time where our attention is drawn to the light, and everybody's attention is drawn to the light because of the dark times. And that's where Christ shows up and says, I'll give you an instruction to come closer to me. Powerful stuff, man.
The disciples found themselves in that dark time, in a storm, after being obedient to Christ. Like Christ is like, meet me over to we'll go over to the other side. They're like, all right.
Yes.
They have a boat. In the pathway of obedience, they run into a storm. They experience darkness. And I could imagine, we talk about, you kind of imagine them in that situation as fishermen. And, they've experienced storms before. And for them to be afraid in this type of environment, it had to be a storm in the middle of the dark. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure in their mind, they're like, man, we could turn around. Let's just turn around. You know what I'm saying? But as much as we, talk about the other disciples outside of Peter, like, they still remain in the pathway of obedience, right? So they're continuing to move forward. But that situation just kind of shows us, like, we can be obedient to Christ. We can be servants to the kingdom. You know what I'm saying? We can witness and tell about our faith, do all the right things, and still experience a bad storm, in which we are doing right now. Storms, loved ones, friends being sick, passing away. We see, the violence and the social uprising in our nation. Then even the personal situations that we have to deal with, family issues, financial issues, all of the job issues, all this stuff. And we're like, God, you told me to do this. Like,
right. I'm following your directions.
Set him up. It's like, Lord, you set us up.
Right.
You
told me to go this way. Like, what's going on here?
Right.
But that is crazy though, because I'm sorry.
No,
sometimes it does make you. It possibly could have made the disciples doubt
Yes.
If you look at modern day, like when you run into trouble, you might think, well, Lord, did I hear you right?
That's
did
right.
I actually hear your voice? But I think in that moment, maybe they could have been having some doubts about, did we get in the right boat? Like, is this the way he told us to go? Whatever else. But I love how Jesus still showed up, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And revealed himself to them. That's incredible.
Yeah. In fact, that is such the love of Christ to be like, I know my disciples are probably doubting right now. Like, I know it's probably a thing. Let me come and show up. Like that right there, that brings peace to me. That's a good time.
And not just the fact that he showed up, but how he showed up. Like,
yeah.
Like Pastor P said, he was so smooth with it. He just
right
in the middle of the storm, though. It's not like he's walking on dry ground, like on the land. Like he's fully walking in the middle of the storm, on top of what the disciples are dealing with. And to me, that is so powerful. Like, we serve a God, like, in Jesus, who doesn't just sit in high places and pray for us, as he tells us, as he tells him to go over to the other side, he goes up to the mountain to pray. So we have a God in high places, like interceding, but then we also have a God that will intervene, not just intercede, but intervene. Come on.
Yes.
It's a word.
Listen here. Yes, it is.
And so when Peter sees that, he's like, wow, if it's you, then call me out there with you. And so then we see Peter kind of walking on water. And so, Janai, when you see that kind of imagery of here's Peter like walking on top of what he was just afraid of, and how the presence of God kind of gives us that power to overcome what may overwhelm us. Like, what is that? What should that do to us as believers in a time such as this?
Oh my goodness, that should truly increase our confidence in God. I always think about what would happen if the other disciples just jumped out the boat and started walking. It was Jesus who was like called Peter, you know what I mean? So Peter said, Jesus, if it's you, bid me to come out there. The other disciples are like, I don't think you should do that. This is kind of weird. But Jesus said, Peter, come on. And Peter came through, and he's walking on water. Like, sometimes we hear that and we're just, oh yeah, he walked on water. Jesus walked on water. That's amazing. That's a miracle.
Yes,
and so just looking at that and considering the fact that literally, like, Peter did what Jesus was doing. And not to get, too far off, but Mark chapter 16 talks about, Jesus is saying, greater works you all do. So that had to have been mind-boggling for Peter to experience like this amazing, miraculous thing. And even the disciples, they weren't walking on water, but they're watching this happen. So they know that this is real. So it just, again, increases my confidence in our God. This intervener, this interceder, like Jesus is everything. And it increases my confidence in my faith in him.
Yeah. I like what you said. It ain't like they just jumped out the boat. And I think sometimes that's how it's perceived. I'm glad Pastor cleared that up, because not everyone is going to understand our inclination to go out to that depth to get closer to Christ, right?
That's right.
So for some people, the disciples looking at him like, who do we think he is? He trying to show off? Like, what make him want to walk on water? But he was inclined to like call out, because remember, that's what Pastor talked about. Even to go onto that territory, they had to get over the fear. They thought he was a ghost. It distorted.
Right.
Seeing him in that situation distorted their image of who he was. So it caused them to, to call out. And then when he revealed himself as who he was, that bolstered like Peter's faith to be able to say, well, if you're doing that in the midst of a storm, then I want to come where you at. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to get to that level where I can stroll on the water in the middle of a storm as well. You know what I'm saying? But I can imagine what it done for all of their faith, particularly Peter's, but all of them who witnessed that. Because remember, at the end of it, they went from, Lord, is that really you? To surely this is the Son of God. You know what I mean? So they went from doubt to Jan Shirley Ann, right? To Shirley.
I mean, what you said, P, was right on. Like, this idea of them being in the storm and misperceiving who he was, like the ghost. Because here it is, we did what Jesus told us to do, and now we're finding ourselves in a storm or in the dark. And sometimes when we are in that pathway of obedience and still run into issues and situations, we begin to kind of second guess who God is. Well, maybe God ain't good if we in a pandemic and we seeing all this bad stuff. Or, maybe God isn't who God says he is. But then God will give us a word. So not only did
it's me.
It is I. Come on. So not only did he come in with the presence of, piece of his presence, it's kind of, reaffirming who he is with the power of his word. So he
absolutely.
So it's me. You can't see that it's me, but I'm going to give you the word to remind you that
Mm.
I'm a God that shows up in the storm, not just intervenes,
My
but
Lord.
intercedes, but intervenes. So
Yes.
keep that and forget what everybody else say. I'm gonna hop out this boat. He's walking on water, and like when I reference this story or like preach this text, like to me that reminds us as Black folks in America, like if Peter can walk on water in the midst of all that he was going through, if he can walk like Jesus in that storm, surely you and I can walk like Christ in
That's
social
good.
justice, in racism and hatred and division, and all of these different things. And so he's walking like Jesus, but then it says he sees the wind.
Oh man.
And then
Oh man.
he's like, how do you see wind, bro? Like 1 minute.
Oh, the invisible. Oh my gosh. Yes.
But 1 minute you're keeping your eye on Jesus and you're doing the impossible despite what your friends and family says. You step out of the boat, you're walking by faith, and then for whatever reason, the very thing that you had just overcame is now overcoming you, and you're drowning in that situation.
Yeah.
You kept your eye off Jesus. Pastor P, in the midst of all that's going on, like we turn on the news, bad news, we turn on, social media, all these different things. Like how important is it for us to keep our eye on Jesus despite of the distractions, and how do we do that when everything is calling for our attention?
Yeah.
It's right here, man. We can keep our eyes on Christ, and even when we start to sink, we have to maintain that proximity to where we know he can reach out. I mean, looking at the culture in a political season anyway, especially one like this, in this type of election in 2020, it's like political storm season, or it's like political seasons are like spiritual storm seasons, right? Because it's so much divisiveness in the air, it's so much politics, right? And we talking about police and all of everything else. So it's really easy, even when we know, once we've recognized Christ in the storm, once we've already, and we'll get to when we actually have stepped out on the water, right? And we are kind of walking on it, we start to kind of sink a little bit. But what led to that sinking is that they started looking at the murders every day, right? It was being bombarded by it, right? They start looking at all of the bad policies. They start listening to the filth coming out of certain leaders' mouths, right? They start doubting everything, like maybe this is a hopeless situation, So I think it's because, I mean, it's one thing to look at, it's another thing to focus on, right?
That's right.
And I think sometimes we accidentally look at Christ instead of focusing on it. We focus on the storm and just look at Christ every now and then, right? But he's saying, no, I mean, you're going to see it. It's going to be in front of you.
That's
Don't
right.
focus on that. Focus on me.
That's right.
You know what I mean? You saw that, you knew what it was going to do, sticks and stones, blowing and everything, but you just keep walking like I'm walking. So, I mean, it's not easy. I don't even want to make it seem like it's an easy thing to do, because you're wearing that. You are seeing your brother John the Baptist's, your fellow disciples going through that tribulation. You are looking at your friends panic, the other disciples in the boat. But just maintaining focus on Christ, I think, is a reflection of the maturity of a disciple. And that's where we have to put some work into.
For sure. Janai, you got anything?
That's good.
Focusing on Christ?
Listen, I can appreciate that. Literally, that deal of there are things around us and we can't ignore it. Like, it's happening. We can see it. But that should all be happening in our peripheral. You know what I mean? Like, our focus really should be on Jesus. When we take our eyes off of him, we see what happens. We saw what happened with Peter. We see what happens in our own lives. We can all attest to times where it's like, oh, I think I got off track. Even how Pastor said, like, first when you're sinking, right?
Right.
But so everything that's going on in the world, while we need to stay abreast of everything should be on the peripheral. It should be on the sidelines. We see it, we note it, and we can acknowledge it, but our focus should be on Jesus. And I think he hit it on the head. Like, that's intense. And we saw what happened with Peter. Just went right on down.
Right on down. He got that sinking feeling, and he begins to fall and sink. But then even when, like, and this is the good news about God, man, like, he sees us fall. We're falling in the presence of God, literally falling in his presence. And he's still like, don't worry about it, I got you. I know
Right.
I know you. I mean, you took your eye off me. You got distracted by what was going on in your environment. And I called you out here to be with me, to get closer to me. And you failed. You failed in the midst of all of that. But then even when Christ sees us fall, he still comes out and gives us a hand and literally catches us in the midst of all of that. He sees the reason why he failed. He knows, that he has failed, but he still goes out and catches them. And so, Pastor talked about this idea of, Peter crying out to Christ in a crisis, and this idea that power comes in prayer, and God answers our prayers and hears our prayers. And when when he hears that faith that's in our prayers, he'll come through and catch us. And we go back to what, Janai said earlier, this idea of not fearing, having the confidence that Christ will catch you. And then, of course, that powerful illustration, that imagery of that young man, catching that baby out of a burning building.
Yeah.
A young man catch a baby, he don't know, how much more shall the God we serve, go out and catch his children.
Yes, sir.
His children are slipping and falling in a stormy, dark environment. And that right there, Janai, should give us confidence, right?
Absolutely. I think, Jesus could have taken the stance of, oh, Peter, I told you, come out here and walk. I'm just going to let you sink. I'm just done. I gave you instructions. I gave you my word. I'm here with you, all of this, and you lost confidence. Yeah. Instead, Jesus is like, let me talk you through this and let me catch you. I'm not going to leave you out here. That again is another deal for us to have more confidence in Jesus. Even if we mess up, even if we fall, even if we get off focus, he is still going to take care of us. Of course, he doesn't give us a license to just go around falling. Right. But at the same time, we know that there are things that happen in life that will just kind of throw us off our track. And we can always trust in Jesus and always trust that he's going to pick us up.
Yeah. And when the proximity is what allows for that quick response, right? And I know, Jay, you got kids. You just seen some times where J3 crawled up on the stairs or something, and you don't wait till he hit the ground to catch him, right? It said he started to sink. You can start to fall. And when the Father is close enough, as soon as you see that momentum follow, that your reaction is to reach out and catch him before he fully falls. So I think that's the beautiful point that you made, Janai. Like, it doesn't give us an excuse, just like, I can just fall and Christ is going to catch me. You know what I mean? No, the pursuit is to walk like him. That's right. When the circumstances create now a situation where you start to fall, Christ is there to catch us. God is there to catch us. And it's in the presence of the disciples. And we can't be ashamed to take that risk, for the shame of falling in front of the disciples or starting to sink in front of the disciples. The whole point is proximity and staying close enough to the Father to where if I do start to sink, I know he got my back. That's why I can be strong and courageous, right? That's why I can fear not every day.
Right. And look what the disciples saw. They saw Jesus say, come on, Peter. They saw Peter walk on water. They saw Peter begin to sink and Jesus pick him up. Like, they got a chance as disciples to witness another level of Jesus's ministry. So whatever we go through is not just for us. It's not just increasing our faith in Christ. It's actually helping other disciples to get an understanding of who Jesus is. It increases other people's faith when we watch and see other people, how they handle their fall, how they handle their moments of losing their faith.
We might not even get it the first time. Pastor Jay, you be saying, and I heard Pastor say it too, some lessons only can be learned in the dark, right? And in the stormy times. Like, we learn a lot about Christ. We learn a lot about ourselves. He teaches his disciples in those moments. I mean, we know the other passage, where he's sleeping in the boat in the middle of a storm and then calm the storm. So we see he didn't just give that kind of lesson once. Like, it was other times too where he's trying to show them these same principles, that even in the midst of the storm, I'm here and you can have peace and you can fear not because I got y'all's back. You know what I mean? That's some powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And then even, in addition to the disciples piece, like, they were able to grow in their faith, seeing somebody else go through it and not being so jealous, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
He stepped out there and God saved him. Well, God ain't saved me, when I failed the other day when I was out there. Like, you know what I'm saying? They were able to, they were so mature in their walk that it didn't happen to them for them to grow in their faith, but they could see God moving in the life of somebody else.
Yes.
Like, oh, you truly are the Son of God. You know what I'm saying? Right.
It
have to happen to personally them for them to see that, Jesus is who he said he was. So, even with that, they came to that conclusion as a result of a storm, darkness, slipping and falling, and all of that bad stuff that went on in that situation. At the end of it all, they were able to see Jesus as the Son of God, as the Messiah. When just before the storm, they were part of this crowd that wanted to make Jesus a king.
Oh, my.
Jesus is like, I'm more than a king. I'm more than a man-made king. I'm king.
Come on here.
but it took a storm for them to realize, oh, wait,
Yes.
surely.
Surely.
You about to shout me. You about to shout me, Reverend.
Surely you shout you, Doc.
Now.
Surely you shout you.
Hey, but they said, surely you are the Son of God. And that's what he taught us, Sunday reminded us that sometimes it takes the darkness and the storm for us to really see God. As Pastor P said earlier, to truly see the light in darkness.
Right.
And, kind of a reminder that God does his best work in the dark. And, Pastor Johnson read off that list of those moments and events in Scripture where God shows up in dark times to reveal himself, to set people free, to give people healing, to give people a reminder of who he is. And so we want to encourage anybody out there watching, like, it may be bad times right now, but be open to the move of God. Don't get distracted by what's going on. You can see it, don't ignore it, but still focus on Christ. And when we do that, we can see that God is still good, that God has a plan, that God works everything out for the good.
That's right.
And we have to go through something in order for us to truly learn that. So Janai, after we dealt with all of this, we hear the sermon, and let us remind the people as well, if you haven't checked out the sermon, or if you have checked out the sermon, go back and listen to it on our YouTube page, Facebook page, on our website. When you get that sinking feeling, and all of us have gone through that. So you listen to it, you debrief it, you internalize it, you meditate on it. Where do we grow from here, Janai? We hear the points that Pastor brought out in this text. How do we grow from here in the midst of our storm, trying to get closer to Jesus?
Yeah. Here's number one way. If we don't have this in our spirits already, we have got to steal away and have some time with God alone. We won't be effective for anything that we feel like we're called to do unless we have some time in prayer with Christ. There are so many, we can't walk with Christ unless we have a moment where we literally steal away. And so I think that's huge. We got a lot going on, and Pastor even brought it up. There's a bunch of protests and marches that are happening, and people are really live on social media and trying to make sure to get their word out there, and they're saying whatever they need to say. And not to say that nobody's called to that, because we got to make some things happen in this world, especially this year. We got to make some change. But before we do all that, we got to seek first the kingdom. So our first deal needs to be, okay, let me spend some time in prayer. Let me steal away. Let me get away. Let me do what Jesus did, so that when it's time to do what Jesus does, I'm equipped. I have power to do that. That's how we grow from here.
That's good. Pastor P.
Yeah, man, I love what Pastor talked about, the long, annotated, fancy, even creative prayers. Them's cool, and we can do a lot of them too, right? But sometimes it's just, Father, help me, right? Father, help us. So like, that would be where we grow from here, man. For especially those who carry a real burden for everything that's happening in the culture and society with social justice, it's real easy to not be able to recognize Christ in it. And even when we seem to try to make him the type of king that we want him to be, right? To slay these wicked people, like send your fire down on them, right? To try to make him a tyrant. Right, smite them.
Smash them.
And I ain't mad. Exactly. And I ain't mad at him. Like, I get it, but that's like, let Christ do it his way. And I think instead of us growing from here as maturing disciples, instead of us having a whole bunch of gimme prayers, Lord, give me this and give me that, like, let's pray and ask God for instructions. You know what I mean? Let's say, Lord, if this is you and this is what you call it, can you give me an instruction to come out and meet you in this area of my life or whatever else, as opposed to trying to, force God's hand and kind of do the vending machine prayers like Dr. Tony Evans talked about. You put your prayers in the vending machine, and when you don't get what you want out, you start kicking the machine, right, and give up or put money into it. But I think we got to learn how to ask God for instructions, and then just trust his plan.
Yeah,
definitely got to trust his plan and trust that we serve a God in Jesus, who is sitting high and interceding on our behalf in heaven. That's what the scriptures say. He's on the right hand of God, interceding for his people. But then at the same time, he is Emmanuel. He is God with us. So we can trust that God is interceding on our behalf in glory. But at the same time, we can believe that God will show up in darkness in the middle of a storm and give us what we need to get to the other side.
What's that you said earlier? Interceding and intervening.
That's it. That's it.
That's what you said. Where's my pen? Let me find my pen.
Write that down. Write that
Write
down. Write that down. God will intercede and intervene. That's what Christ did for us. And we can trust that and believe that. But sometimes it'll take a storm for you to be like, oh, surely you do intervene and intercede. It will take for you to believe that and get a relationship with Christ and get closer to Christ and walk like Christ. God will certainly make sure that will take place. So with that, listen, thank y'all so much for tuning in to the Debrief this week. We'll see y'all Sunday, but before Sunday, tonight, Pastor P, tonight.
It's going down on Instagram. It's going down tonight.
Tonight at 8:00 in just a few moments, Pastor P will be hosting our teen Bible study. And Pastor P, I'm supposed to be on next week, right? Or sometime?
Yes, sir. You're supposed to be on next week, man. You ready to get in on this Black Doctrine thing? They waiting to hear from you, right?
You walk through the book of Acts. So make sure you tune in tonight. Bring your teens. Tell your teens to log on Instagram and follow the Eastern Star Church page on Instagram, and you can get caught up with all that's going on here at the Eastern Star Church. We're so grateful for your generosity and support throughout this time, and we pray that we can continue to be a blessing to you and your family across the nation and the world. Until next time, family, peace.